Welcome to Soapbox Speakers, the third podcast, aka Matt talks and Jake listens.
It's true. It's just occurred to me that we had to do an edit of the Soapbox number 2.
I just realised I got myself comfortable there.
Yeah, you did.
And it was just like gree.
Yeah. We've been having some audio issues, and the other thing I've just realised, because of those audio issues, we had to edit down last week's podcast, which means that the intro and my intro where I give
so
the
it's
name,
technically still your turn.
So technically I've just realised it was still my turn because
okay.
Discussing this. No, you've done it now.
No, do your intro from last week that everybody missed.
That would require me to have to remember it. So
oh right, okay.
Soapbox Speakers, aka
Virtue Signal.
The Virtue Signalers. I think it was something along those lines.
I did put it in the title like 15 times. So.
Well, that was my idea. I was like, virtue signaling everywhere.
Well, I put it in the description before you said that as well. So now it just reads like we've said it too many times.
That's true.
We're trying too hard.
But trying too hard or comedy gold? I believe that's for the fan base.
I believe that's all about perspective.
Yeah.
Speaking of perspective onto comedy.
Hello.
I feel like that brings us nicely into talking about a certain pug. With a certain attitude towards the Nazi.
That fascist pug.
I just want to say it right now. Gas the Jews.
Yes.
Completely out of context.
So
somebody can now put me in jail.
Also, you've said that, and then there's just me going, yes.
Yeah, that's a snippet that's going to be taken out now.
I should have that as my text alert sound or something.
Yeah.
Gas the Jews. Yes. No.
Anyway.
No one will question it.
I can't remember his name. Is Count Dankula?
His name is Count Dankula.
Count Dankula, yeah. So, for those of you that don't know, a guy...
No, we need to be clear on this, actually.
Oh,
let's just be clear, because it's not him, it's the pug doing the Hitler salute. So, that to me says that the pug isn't self-expressing a fascist ideology.
I was going to do a little bit of the whole background story before we got into what actually happened, so people know what we're talking about.
That's a fair point, and I did jump the gun a little bit, but I thought of it earlier and had to say it.
You had to get it in first.
So I wanted to kind of segue into it before we did the whole, and this is what it is for those that don't know. But you're right, and you should introduce it. It's a good start.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. People come. All the 40 people that come to listen to our podcast come to listen to it for the unscripted fuck ups. That's literally why they're here. Yeah. Like when I drink water instead of telling people about something. Okay, so Count Dankula is a YouTube comedian. Essentially, I think that's how he portrays himself. Anyway, and he made a video where he had trained a pug to give the Nazi salute every time he said "Gas the Jews" or "Sieg Heil," and he put up a video of him doing that. I think 23 times or something like that. And this video blew up. I think it got like 3 million shares or something like that.
It went proper
ridiculous
viral,
amount. Yeah, and because of that, he got arrested and has been found guilty of inciting hate crimes.
He's been charged under hate speech law.
Hate speech law, yeah, which is a law that the UK has, which is actually really. Not many people talk about it, but it is something that we really shouldn't have.
Yeah, and also, just to be clear, given the nature of him being charged for this case specifically is a case-setting precedent. It's a precedent-setting case, is what I'm just trying to say.
Oh yeah, and UK law is based on precedent. So once it's been done, it can now be referenced and allow it to be done again.
The way the law is interpreted is through once law is written, application of said law through case can then influence how said law is applied. So now...
so this is a bit worrying.
Yeah.
So essentially, you've got two camps of thought on this that I've seen anyway, on this topic, which is, on the one hand, people are like, yeah, fuck him, send him to jail, because he said gas the Jews, and that's not okay. And then you've got the other side of things, the right side, which is saying...
Okay.
I'm not biased, but when they're right, they're right. Which is saying it's comedy. The humour is subjective. And this is no way hate crime, because who in their right mind is going to be using a video of a pug Sieg Heiling as recruitment material? Yeah. Come and be a neo-Nazi because we've got a pug.
White supremacists who really like pugs.
Maybe.
Am I not right in thinking that a pug is a Austrian dog breed?
I don't know.
I have a strange feeling that's the case.
Really?
Which would make sense. As in, like, if you were going to choose a species to kind of... Because I'm just thinking of, like, in the UK, it's the British Bulldog, isn't it?
True.
So I just like the idea that...
Yeah, but just like the British Bulldog, it is massively inbred to the point where it can barely live now.
Yeah, much like the pug, yeah.
Which is a wonderful symbol for eugenics.
And selective breeding and, like, racial supremacy, yeah.
Which I don't think Count Dankula was actually, considering.
Sorry, just to be clear, he totally wasn't. I don't know.
Count Dankula is a classic shit poster. He was just trying to get a raise.
If anything, he did it to annoy his girlfriend.
Wow.
It was his dog. It was his girlfriend's dog.
That guy seems
so if anything,
winning material for a boyfriend.
If anything, it would suggest that his girlfriend is a white supremacist. If we're going down this road, because it's her dog. So if you like a pug, that you're probably a white supremacist. And you might want to take a step back and really kind of think about your preferences in
you making
dog
a joke?
breeds. Well, you know how I'm really good at the whole deadpan thing with you're not sure if I'm being serious.
No. I was sure there, but I was pretty sure that somebody out there was kind of.
Well, yeah, I'm going to start using that now.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to start using it, and I'm going to wait and see how many podcasts we can get away with me being that deadpan before I get charged with hate speech laws. Oh, boom! I dropped the bomb. Drop the mic.
I see what you did there, and I thoroughly.
That was a big setup. But I'm so glad I went for it.
I'm so glad I kept my mouth shut and let you do it, man. That was beautiful.
The longer that setup, proportionally speaking, the longer the setup, the more likely it is that you're gonna fuck up. And I was like, I'm going in big, going in big.
You've ruined it a little bit by kind of talking about
gloating about how amazing it was.
Gloating about how amazing your setup was, but whatever, man. It's all cool.
No, it's the creative craft, and I think people like to see that.
So. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. The judge, I can't quote him exactly, but basically said and agreed with the prosecution that context doesn't matter. It was what that's said that was mattered. So what he's essentially saying there is it doesn't matter why he said gas the Jews, because he said gas the Jews, he is thereby subject to the law and guilty of hate speech, which means. And I what's his name? The guy who does the pretends to be a reporter, and then he's a comedian, pretends to be a reporter, and then
I do know who he is, but I don't remember his name.
Oh, okay.
Sure,
do you want to Google it while I keep talking?
Yeah, you keep talking.
Thanks, man. So essentially, the judge has just gone. Yeah, it doesn't matter about the context. He said gas the Jews, therefore he is guilty of hate speech. Which means we're guilty of hate speech because it doesn't matter about the context in which we're saying it, even though we're saying it because we're talking about
We're doing it ironically.
Well, no, we're talking about the case. So if you talk about the case and go, he's guilty of hate speech.
So all those newspapers that are quoting what the video was about, technically also guilty of hate speech because context doesn't matter. They printed gas Jews and said,
Exactly. Thank you, Matt. That's the point I was trying to bring across, but I'm glad you interrupted and took it as your own. That is basically the title of my sex tape. So I thought I'd stretch it out to. And when's that coming out? Yeah. Is this going too far into the joke? My bad.
Anyway, if you Google.
Anyway, let's not. I don't even want to know if you do have a sex tape. Just as by the way, there are some things that I shouldn't know about you, Matt. Yeah. Well, anyway, so Count Dankula is possibly facing some time in jail because of making a YouTube video about a pug, which just seems really worrying.
So a fascist pug.
Well, yeah, whatever.
A pug with some clear Nazi fascist leanings. Yeah. Jonathan Pye is
Jonathan Pye. Okay, so anyone who goes and listens to Jonathan Pye's little skit about it, it's really interesting and funny and concise. And I've basically just parroted a couple of phrases from that as well, so you'll be able to do that and go, Jake isn't original. He just talks, says what other people say.
Remember a moment ago when you were accusing me of taking what you were about to say and making it my own?
Yeah, I did it. I know, the sweet irony is real. What can I say? What can I say? Anyway, I feel like that's basically concisely summed up the old Nazi pug. Any other points to make?
There is kind of a discussion to kind of be had as to the issues, like the UK has always kind of had an interesting history when it comes to the what is deemed in good taste. We've got a long, rich history of it, and I think it largely. I think it largely stems from.
What was the other one? Oh, it reminds me of if you want a nigger for a neighbour, vote Labour.
Vote Liberal or Labour.
Yeah.
Was the phrase. Yeah, so like the Tory. Sorry, for those that don't know, I forget which borough it was in, but in the 70s there was a Tory MP candidate who ran a campaign in that borough, where they handed out leaflets which said, "If you want a nigger for a neighbour, vote Liberal or Labour." That was the campaign they ran under. And yeah, it's Labour that gets accused of anti-Semitism and having a race problem. Interesting. All I could say is your memories are very short.
Because Matt, it doesn't matter who's right; it's about who has the most money.
Yes, it would seem that way, and it would seem that the Russians have the most money as they're financing the Tories' campaign. So,
dropping truth bombs all over the place.
Yeah, so Theresa May, if you want to send a sign, just here's a hint: if you want to send a sign that fuck you Russia for using a nerve agent on our lands, maybe give back that money that you took for your party. Let's give that back to the Russian oligarchs.
You hearing, mate? Are you hearing, Poundland Thatcher?
Yeah.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Because she's trying to upgrade from Poundland Thatcher to Thelon Thatcher.
Yeah,
which is why she's taking the money.
Yeah, you've got a point there.
She just can't understand that she'll never be
you say that,
quite as evil as the true Iron Lady.
No, because the Iron Lady, although ardently saying she would never negotiate with the IRA, was secretly having negotiations with the IRA.
Only after they tried to blow her up.
No, I think it was before then as well. Because I think one of the reasons for the assassination attempt was because there was a fringe group within the IRA that wasn't happy that the IRA was negotiating with Theresa. Don't quote me on that. Not anyway, Theresa. Thatcher.
Before we
don't
get too far away from the topic, I'll just remember one more thing about Count Dankula.
Oh yeah.
Nothing to do with him, in fact. So we have hate speech laws in the UK. The US doesn't have these laws.
Free speech all the way, baby.
Free speech. Despite massive pressure to the contrary, like time and time again, people have tried to push this idea that hate speech is
that speech should be curtailed in the name of decency and taste. And
and in the US they have consistently gone, no, like they have the right to say these things. You have the right to ignore them.
Yeah.
And I personally feel like this is one of the cases where the US is way ahead of us. Yeah. Because hate speech? Like, come on.
I mean, the price for that though is the Westboro Baptist Church is within its right to. Yeah, I did notice the pictures as your screensaver.
So for those of you that
seriously, we're doing this again.
Well, you did just bring it up. I was just going to point it out as you were talking, and I wasn't actually going to say it because they can't see what we're doing.
It's true.
But it's too late now.
It's true, it's on me.
So, screensavers. My screensaver occasionally comes up with boobs and it distracts Matt, and this time I pointed it out to make him distracted and
the irony being I had spotted it but decided not to make it a thing, and then he went and made it a thing.
Yeah, I did.
But then he's not psychic, so I can't hold it against him.
You do try to, though. So he keeps it warm.
Yeah. So, what was I saying? I think it was about hate speech laws. Oh yeah, unfortunately the price for complete freedom of speech is that Westboro Baptist Church is allowed to picket the funerals of dead veterans.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, if you walk the streets of London, there are Christian preachers who can shout at you saying that you're a devil worshipper, and yet no one arrests them. So I don't know.
Yeah. On the flip side, if he was in the US, Count Dankula would not have been arrested for saying gas the Jews to a pug.
And it's also why the KKK is allowed to publish its eugenics literature. I use the term literature quite loosely there.
Yeah.
And also why an awful lot of people involved in the far right, so things like Britain First, and who was the name the guy who assassinated Joe Cox?
Oh, I don't even want to know his name.
Yeah, he had. It
doesn't matter.
He had an awful lot of white supremacist literature, all of which had been imported from the US. I just find that quite interesting.
Yeah.
Also, another interesting thing is the information for making an improvised handgun he'd got from pamphlets that had been made in the US. Again, probably by white supremacist groups there, so groups like organisations like the KKK.
So you're making a really good argument for why we should have our hate speech laws.
No, because ultimately I'm not terrified of the KKK.
And you are terrified of.
Just to be clear, I'm not.
Count Dankula.
I'm not terrified. Yeah, because today it's a pug doing a Nazi salute. the next day it's and then then there's going to be a next thing that sets a case precedent. Then it's going to be a next thing, and then it's eventually potentially going to become to the point where that politician actually is hugely corrupt, but because of the way we've set up this hate speech law, like the way we've manipulated the legal system and case law, now means that you can't tell anyone. So
fear of prison.
like in my mind, I'd rather have liberty than potential tyranny, I guess.
Liberty or death.
And the cost for that liberty is occasionally I'm going to be offended by some nasty fucker who decides to do something awful.
Pick it again.
But then equally you're listening to this podcast, and you've probably been offended at one point or another.
Well, yeah, maybe.
So
I know I've been offended by this at one point or another already, and I'm the one doing it.
I made myself sad.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't. I stand by it all.
Yeah, you keep telling those ethnic minorities what to do, Matt. You keep telling them. Okay. What's the next topic?
Where's your list?
I don't have one.
Are you kidding me?
I've done no prep again.
Are you kidding me with this?
No
shit?
prep. Count Dankula. I brought up Count Dankula. That's
you
on
did,
my
which
list.
was one of my subjects.
That's on my list.
Okay.
There was the other one that I sent you.
Yes, which we were going to research beforehand, but
we never did.
Can we save that one?
So good.
We can
save it. I
was going to talk about anti-Semitism in Labour because that's doing the rounds again.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ! All right, there is none. Boom, nailed it.
Yeah. In a nutshell, that's it. Beyond the fact that you don't truly know anyone.
Is this Labour in general, or just
the
good old JC?
The campaign is directed mostly at JC.
They're really worried about this guy, aren't they?
They're fucking terrified.
Yeah. Do you know why? I can give you an example of exactly why.
I imagine they would say because he's going to destroy this country.
No. The reason why is I was having a conversation with a co-worker at work. All right, a guy who's never voted.
Right.
About how, I just basically went, yeah, the Tories are fucking everything up. He went, oh, why? And I explained it, and he went, that really makes sense. And he went, but what's the option? And I went, voting for Labour. That's the only option I see. And he agreed, and I'm pretty sure he's going to vote. And that is why they are terrified of Jeremy Corbyn.
Why? Because like a lot of what he says makes sense.
No, because we're currently in a position where he is representing because if we still had Tory like Labour, right? So we had the difference between Labour and Tory like Labour.
Vote Tory, yeah.
Right. The Tories would still be doing well, and if JC wasn't there, I'm pretty sure that's basically what we would have.
Yes, because the alternative would just be Labour, who you'd think, well, they're just a lighter version of Tories.
But Jeremy Corbyn is representing the idea that there is a radically different way of doing things, and the Tories are currently on a campaign which massively hits everyone. Hits the majority of the UK, the majority of the working class, and actually kind of hitting the middle class as well now. They're in a prime position for Jeremy Corbyn to go, yeah, all right, but I can make things different, and they can call him a socialist, they can call him a communist as much as they fucking like, but at the end of the day, if the idea of that is more appealing than what the Tories are currently doing, regardless of what label you put on it, people will still go that way. At least I hope.
I mean, I would say that the simplest way I can put it is this: the Tories and New Labour, which is what Labour became. So like Tony Blair, Gordon Brown.
Poor Gordon Brown though.
So that all has its roots in the economic concept of neoliberalism, which Thatcher and Reagan were huge proponents of, which is all about deregulation of the banks. Money and capital should be free to move where it needs to go. Trade should be able to happen as tariff-free as possible.
Yeah, they basically got it wrong.
They got it wrong, but unfortunately it became part of the ideology, so the Tories are still pushing the neoliberal thing. The reason I bring all this up is because there's a simple way of explaining why certain people are so terrified of Jeremy Corbyn. It's because during that time, we've had wage stagnation for 10 years, where working class people on minimum wage have not seen an increase in their wages in real term, and in actual fact have seen a decrease in real terms. And the richest 10% of the country, and even globally, because this neoliberal idea was rolled out everywhere, the richest 10% of the world have quadrupled their wealth. Now and this is why JC is so terrifying, because he's the only one who has even acknowledged that this exists, and this neoliberal model does not work because of like concepts like trickle down economics and where they print money, which was the justification for why the Bank of England injected huge amounts of cash. I forget what it's called.
And that is all completely true.
Yeah.
But the reason... But interesting.
So who owns the newspapers? The top to 10%. Sorry, I just want to kind of clarify. I want to finish my point.
Yeah. Okay.
So the reason there's so many smear campaigns against anyone speaking out against this sort of thing, and in our case it's JC, and in America's case it was Bernie, is because he is the only one who is arguably asking to change what our concept of how the economy works is, in a way that first of all is grounded in sound economic theory, and on top of that means that a hell of a lot of people who have in the last 30 years become incredibly wealthy because of this current economic model that seems to dictate everything, their wallets are about to get light. And by light, I don't mean they're about to be thrown into the dirt. I just mean they're not going to be able to make as much money as they have been.
They're still going to be making profits, they're just not going to make as much.
Yeah.
Which kind of really does...
And they're wanting to distribute some of that profit to... the lower income end.
Yeah, but what's really going to kick them in the teeth and give Labour a chance of taking back control isn't all of that, despite the fact that that is all completely valid. Like, what's really going to get them the votes is the fact that the NHS is suffering because of this model, and benefits are suffering because of this model. Young people are suffering because of this model. Schools and teachers are suffering because of this model, and people now know that. Like it's not something that people can ignore anymore because it's just everywhere. Like in everything you do, you have an appointment at the hospital. It's taking way longer. You have your teacher at school is quitting twice in your child. Like because when I was a kid, I had the same teachers all the way through. You know, it was a rare thing to have a teacher quit, but now, like, they're losing them hand and fist.
There's a point I disagree with you in this, because what the argument is being made from the other side is that, no, what you really should do is deregulate it more. The whole school system should be private, the whole healthcare system should be private, because the market will deliver.
What, like it delivered with trains?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so what I mean by that...
But then my point is there are still people that will believe that.
But what I mean by that, for everybody who doesn't know, is the fact that Margaret Thatcher, the milk snatcher, I need to explain that. She took milk from primary school kids. They used to get free milk. She stopped that because the market would deliver. Didn't see any fucking milk on my desk when I was in primary school, but whatever.
That's just bad parenting.
I know. Don't you talk about my mother that way. My mother's a fucking saint. Anyway, she also sold off the train service. So it used to be a national service, and it became privatised with the idea that the market would deliver and it would get better and cheaper and it would run better. And we have the highest train fees of any country in Europe. Per mile. It is genuinely ridiculous. It's like
when they run. Just as another note.
Well, actually, to be fair, the running of them isn't actually that bad. I mean, obviously there are late trains, and it happens enough so that you're aware that it could happen. But for the most part, I've not had huge issues with train services. It's just when you do, it's always a massive hassle. Anyway, I was saying it costs £240 to get a return from Medway to Bristol, and that's about 200 miles.
Don't know.
It's about 200 miles.
Okay.
About 250 maybe at most. 250 miles should not cost you £240 to travel. That's ridiculous. Like, could you imagine if they were like, oh yeah, the petrol is going to cost you £1 a mile? Like, you'd fucking blow your fucking shit. Anyway, but that's the what we live with at the moment, because the market will deliver. And
but what I would argue is, they would say, one of the arguments I have heard as a counter to this is that, well, no, the market is unable to deliver because there's other sectors that are still too heavily regulated. Which is bollocks, just to be clear, that's just complete bullshit.
Yeah. Well, the way it went, I'm not sure I want to give you the opportunity to try it, because, you know...
Well, it's not a question of what me and you think, it's a question of what the UK thinks.
But on travel, I did hear something which was quite nice, just a nice little tidbit. They are bringing back cheap train tickets for 18-year-olds to travel Europe by train.
Cool.
For European citizens. So it will cost you, I think it was something ridiculous, like £25 a month. to be able to travel the train service.
What, for free in Europe?
All over Europe for a month.
If you're under 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, if you're 18 years old. Literally for that year.
Just 18, okay.
Yeah. To which I went, fuck, I'm not 18. Shit. But I wish I could take advantage of that. But my little brother is, and I think he's going to.
That's fucking sweet.
Yeah,
is this run by the government, or...?
I think it's a EU thing.
Okay.
I didn't look too much into it. I kind of just saw that it looked quite promising and sent it to my little brother.
Clever of them.
Yeah.
The reason I'm saying that is because that allows the EU as a conglomerate to exploit free movement. So if you're an 18-year-old trying to work out what to do with your life, you go travelling around Europe at the age of 18.
And you end up in Belgium working as a mechanic or whatever.
Yeah. It allows free movement of young, skilled, pre-skilled labour. I'm using the language quite specifically here. Pre-skilled labour to move around with, basically for free.
Yeah.
And that's...
quite apart from anything else, it's something that young people should be able to do.
Broadens the mind.
Explore the world.
Yeah.
Open your mind up a bit. Meet new and interesting people.
Collect STDs.
Yeah, totally. Just don't collect all of them.
If that is indeed possible.
I'm really trying not to, fuck it. So, while your mum was outside collecting STDs, you were inside collecting Pokemon, and she beat you by a landslide because you only collected most of them.
It's good, I like it.
Thank you, I tried.
It was worth it. Never doubt yourself.
I do, every day.
So, bringing it back to anti-Semitism and Labour on that after that massive tangent, the only reason I kind of wanted to elaborate on this is the only reason this is doing the rounds again is because there is a smear campaign against him, and this is the reason for the smear campaign. It's because of the richest people who hold things, so like Rupert Murdoch and
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, there's a bunch of very rich people really pissed off at what he's about to do, what he will do if he gets into power, and they're terrified of that because their wallets are going to get that little bit lighter.
Do you think they're going to he's going to get killed as well if he gets?
Who's JC? He's going to get killed as well. Just a bit. Sorry, just a bit. Whoa. Okay.
I'm not suggesting that Cox got killed.
Okay. Yeah. No.
By a conspircy. However, I could see them going off of the back of that and going, "Oh no."
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And
you're telling me to shut up before we get arrested.
No.
In
It's
jail
just
for hate speech.
No, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, you can't kind of there are a lot of people who were like, when Obama was running, who were just like, I'd vote for him, but I'd be a bit worried if I voted for him, he'd get assassinated, because there'd be some.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, I know, but my point is well, okay, hang on, what are you saying?
No, I wasn't saying I don't want to vote for him in case he dies. I'm saying, do you think that's a possibility if he gets in?
Okay, now the reason I bring that anecdote up is because my response to that was always just it is what it is. You base your life on I don't want to vote for the candidate I want because I'm a bit scared what will happen to them.
Yeah.
Well, fuck that. There's a whole.
Oh no, I'd vote him in anyway. Even if I knew for a certain, this is really bad, but even if I knew with absolute certainty that if Jeremy Corbyn got voted in, he would die, I would still vote for him to get in.
Yeah, I think the other thing that was making me uneasy is because don't get me wrong, I brought up Joe Cox earlier, but in that instance, it's always kind of I always feel a bit uneasy about that one because it's yes, he specifically stated, he screamed death to traitors, and Joe Cox was well known for her liberal attitudes when it came to immigration and was it international aid, and so there is this real kind of nationalistic identity kind of politics thing as to the motivations behind her killer choosing her. My problem is at the same time the problem is I don't want to turn it into kind of political martyrdom.
Yeah.
Which on the flip side, potentially I don't know if Joe Cox would even mind, but then there's also a family to consider, and then there's the fact that it happened 2 years ago, and there's still mourning and grieving that's occurring over that.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm still fucking a bit torn up about it, to be honest. And I know I have no right to be. I don't know the family, but it's just the fact that happened. It's a fucking damn shame.
It's fucked up that as a politician, for the values that you hold, someone felt that the only solution to that was to kill them.
Yeah.
Ignoring other aspects of Joe Cox's killer, because I kind of hesitate to bring up the fact that like the guy clearly had some mental health issues. That I think that kind of goes without saying. But then what terrorist doesn't?
I mean, with these sort of things, like whenever there's a school shooting in America or whenever something like this happens, I always make a point to not find out anything about them or who they are, just because people like that shouldn't gain renown.
It's partly why it's done,
yeah. Like I don't want to buy into this idea that if you go on a shootout, everyone's going to know your name. I'm not going to know your name. I'm not going to give a fuck. The only person I give a fuck about is Jo Cox. Yeah. The fact that she was taken away far too fucking soon.
Yeah, no, that's a fair testament. Like, based on the work that she was doing, it's a real tragedy. Well, don't get me wrong, every death is a fucking tragedy, but like, just in the sense of like her activism and her her values and what she strove for, I heavily identify with and heavily respect. And it fucking sucks that she was killed for that, as far as I can tell.
You can only hope that there's 10 more of her that have sprung up.
Well, like there's Maria Black. As a prime example, one of my favourite politicians.
Oh my god, that woman is a role model.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just straight up role model for everyone. Like, just damn, you're awesome.
If you don't know who Maria Black is, look her up.
Just look her up.
Just look up a couple of her
That
speeches.
woman is phenomenal.
She is the first. She's the first MP to say "cunt" in the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah.
Like, if that doesn't get you going, I don't know what will.
Not just that. Like, the first time she actually spoke in Parliament, she was 18 or 19. And she just
ripped it.
unloaded the perfect jabs at who was it at the time? David Cameron.
Oh god, yeah.
It was fucking beautiful. Like, mwah! Like, I could kiss her. I could kiss her, but like boundaries.
I could kiss her, but that's not what she's into.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's like it's not even that. It's like you're a stranger. We don't know each other. I'm not kissing you because like I'm into you. Although I am, in the sense that you're fucking amazing. Like you can have sex with my mind, Maria Black. Have sex with my mind.
There's a better way of putting this. She's definitely the kind of person that I'd buy at least 3 pints.
Yes.
For,
yeah.
right?
Totally.
Yeah. Like, which is a much more safe, sane, and platonic way of expressing your appreciation for someone.
Yeah. So
Gonna get you a pint, mate.
Like what Jake said, Maria. If you listen, what Jake said, that's what I meant. But you are amazing.
Keep going.
So, but she's with the SNP, not Labour.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know.
Doesn't fucking matter. I like the SNP just as much.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
Like,
I don't like
Scottish independence.
Anyway, so anti-Semitism in Labour
isn't a thing. Boom. There we go.
Well, like,
might be a thing.
Okay, what I was also going to say is, like, don't get me wrong, I don't doubt that there are politicians who are anti-Semitic, but I also don't doubt that those that are, like Tory, Labour, SNP, Green, like, they exist everywhere, in much the same way that the racist exists everywhere. Don't get me wrong, you're going to get higher incidence of certain groups in certain areas.
Tories.
But this idea that, like, it's one of those things that always kind of does the rounds, because unfortunately Israel exists. And yes, I chose those words quite deliberately, because Israel does seem to have an awful lot of dictating of the narrative as to what seems to be anti-Semitic and what isn't.
I was wondering how long it was going to take for us to get onto Israel. Like, podcast 3, there we are. That was the how long it took. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I need to choose my words real carefully. Cause
do you want to do some research and?
First of all, I put it like this: criticism of Israel is not the same as criticising Jews. So I don't believe that Israel owns what anti-Semitism is. I'll put it that way. So by criticising Saudi Arabia, for example, that isn't a criticism of Islam, right? That's a criticism of Saudi Arabia. Those are two different things, and we're happy to do that, but then as soon as a politician starts criticising the behaviour of Israel, there's a massive campaign to have them labelled as an anti-Semite. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Please do not politicise your religion and attach it to a country. That's kind of terrifying.
I agree.
I believe that rationale was what was used to justify the Crusades. Am I mistaken there? Like,
however, it's
quite archaic as a concept.
That has given us some great history to study. I mean, I know. Look, I know a lot of bad shit happened during the Crusades, but oh my god, have you read about it recently? It's fucking incredible.
Do you want to gush about the Crusades?
I could do that.
On the subject.
Let's talk about Muller.
Okay, we're doing this. So, yeah.
Okay, so St. John, right? The Order of St. John, yeah?
Can I finish this?
The Order of St. John are the coolest thing you've ever seen.
Add it to the notes that you haven't made, and we'll jump back to it, right? Let me just finish this.
Alright.
Unfortunately, I just think there is this kind of reactionary stuff where there are people who are protecting the interests of Israel, and one of the strategies they use to protect the interests of Israel is to label anyone who criticises Israel an anti-Semite. Is that me suggesting there's some massive Jewish media conspiracy? No. Though I appreciate there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that believe that, which is one of the reasons why that mural, I think there was a photo of Jeremy Corbyn next to this mural which was labelled anti-Semitic. There was this huge debate of whether or not it was regarding anti-Semitism or bankers, because there's that Jewish stereotype of all Jews are bankers.
Wow.
And don't get me wrong, if you go into the internet, there's a hell of a lot of conspiracies surrounding Jews and the Illuminati. But equally, there's an awful lot of conspiracies surrounding the Illuminati and reptiles from space. So, yeah, I'm looking...
Those Jewish reptiles from space.
Like, for me...
The cloud people, Matt! The cloud people!
Yeah. So, like, the equivalent for me would be like, well, Jeremy Corbyn was shown standing next to this mural. Clearly he believes bankers are all reptiles. Like, that's how absurd that concept is. Like, if you're trying to attach it to, like, some grand Jewish conspiracy, which I appreciate has been around for a long fucking time, but then equally so have a load of other conspiracies. Or like Freemasons. Like, Jeremy Corbyn is a Freemason, therefore clearly is in with the Illuminati. Like, it's kind of absurd.
Do you know what would sort this all out?
What?
The Order of St. John.
Right. Do you just want to gush about the Order of St. John? Because...
I'm sorry, man. Like, you're so into this, and I'm not. I wasn't ready. It's my bad. Like, I honestly don't know a whole lot about Israel, so I could just let you talk for a bit longer and learn if you want. I've derailed you. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me?
I can. It's just I'm not sure I can just kind of jump in and out of it and it not come across as me like
trying to get back into it.
Just fucking hating on Israel, which is not what I'm trying to do. Like,
which
is not what I'm trying to do at all. Anyway.
But it does tie in with Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, again, like this anti-Semitism narrative has its roots in a bunch of stuff, which generally is to do with our relationship with Israel. Another example would be like the UK has had a long relationship with Israel, and the founding of Israel.
I was going to say, didn't we basically just go, well, here's a piece of land?
Hey guys, you can have that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, literally
did that. So when you say we've got a long history with them, what you mean is we
I mean that like in 1894 there was the first Zionist Council where there was a diplomat who was a representative of the British Empire, and this council was basically a meeting of like influential Jewish people around the whole of Europe. They met in, I think it was Vienna. Can't remember now. Look it up. 1894 First Zionist Council. There was a representative of the British Empire there who explicitly stated that the British Empire would fully support the Jewish people establishing the nation state of Israel.
I feel the need to interject here and say that this is actually true and not a conspiracy theory. Like, and
equally, there were a huge amount of politicians all across Europe who massively supported this. This was where the term Zionism comes from, funnily enough. And if you supported Zionism, which is you supporting the establishment, like this is it. That word entered the English lexicon because of our relationship with Israel. Like, that's how deep rooted this shit is, and it's like we don't know that. I find the whole thing really fucking absurd. Anyway,
it's because the average Joe blog on the streets in Britain doesn't need to know this kind of thing, man. Just like they don't need to know about colonisation of the world in their history at school. You know?
This is fine, but then you also have to remember, like, that in the 1950s there was a secret attempt to annex what's the canal in Egypt called that connects to the Indian Ocean?
The Nile?
No, not the, no. It's a canal.
I don't know.
That's going to annoy me. But anyway, there is a massive strategic location within the Middle East which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean. Okay.
Yeah, that would be quite important.
Yeah, and it was controlled by Egypt. And Egypt, on the whole, has historically not really got along that well with the British, funnily enough.
I can't think why.
Yeah, and
what was it again?
And there was a conspiracy between the UK, France, and Israel to take that strip, and Israel was going to take control of it. My point here is we have had a long, rich history of diplomatic relations and doing what I would constitute as pretty unethical shit to basically control the reins of power globally.
And I hate to say it, but we've also had a very long history about fighting over the Mediterranean Sea, which ties quite nicely into the Order of St. John.
Okay, and I hate to say it, but the people who were in power when that happened were Tories. Just want to put that out there.
Say it ain't so. A Tory did something wrong. God help us. And just by the way, Labour leaders have done a lot of bad shit as well.
Yeah.
Because I get that argument quite a lot whenever I go, well, the Tories are fucking it up, and they go, yeah, but what about Tony Blair? And I'm like, yeah, all right, the Labour leaders have fucked it up as well. However,
he was Tory light.
However, Labour gave us the NHS. Name me something the Tories have given us that I should care about. That's genuinely my because
inheritance tax. I think.
Why do we want that?
I mean, there's arguments either way for it. And
yeah, true.
You asked to give an example.
True. All right. Yeah.
I'm trying to think something I can't. I'd have to check. I don't want to talk a load of shit and not realise. I have a strange feeling though. It was the Whigs, the Tory Whigs, back in the day, who introduced the. It was the Privies Act, which is then what led. Ultimately, the Privies Act is what gave birth to the planning system that we have today. It's what led to standards in living conditions and shit like that. It was really kind of the first piece of legislation that led to any kind of standards being recognised as important for the poorest people in our country.
Oh, fair.
So
okay, there we go.
Yeah,
there's one thing.
There is that, but that was 100 and odd years ago.
You could say the same about the NHS, really, with Labour, though. That was just under 100 years ago.
Yeah, but those were massive socialist policies, and I don't hear anyone trying to rewrite that part of history and calling it communist.
Well, they are trying to ruin it. They're trying to
ruin it. No. What I mean by that is, why call Jerry Corbyn is as much a communist as, I forget the name of the guy who introduced the NHS bill. He is a communist.
Yeah,
they are both socialists. They are two different things.
Yeah.
Stop kind of conflating the two. It's a bit like saying the Nazi Party was actually socialist because they had socialism in the title. They weren't. They just weren't. Does that need explaining? Does anyone think they're socialists? Anyway,
Nazis.
Does anyone think that Nazis are socialists? Seriously, is there anyone out there? If you are, ring in.
Yes, ring in to the number that we haven't given.
just comment.
Just randomly ring in the hopes that we're doing a podcast.
Yeah, so okay, I'm done getting riled off about this. Please talk about the Order of St. John.
Okay.
Because I do know this story and it's fucking awesome. I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, which story are we talking about now? Because it's been a while since I've talked about it.
I remember you telling me about the Order of St. John.
Okay, so the Order of St. John. So there were three orders, or three major orders, during the Crusades. There was the Templars, the Hospitallers, and the Order of St. John, I think. It might be that the Hospitallers and the Order of St. John are the same thing, and I'm forgetting the name of the other order. But essentially, there was those three orders. Okay, so Templars, they all did really well during the Crusade. They all made a lot of money killing infidels, essentially. But essentially, what happened is they all kept going for a time. But the Order of St. John is the only order that is still going to this day. And to this day, man, that order has survived a long fucking time. That's 500 odd years of fucking just being badass.
Where are they now?
St. John's ambulances.
Oh, okay, right.
They were in Vietnam. They sent ambulance crews and medics and doctors over to Vietnam.
The reason I wanted to ask that is because I'm aware there's certain countries or city-states that are still technically part of Teutonic orders.
Really?
In the Mediterranean, I think there's certain islands that are still kind of technically a Teutonic order as a country.
I didn't know that.
I think.
I don't know that. But anyway, the Templars essentially were mostly based in France. And they fucked up when they essentially went back to France from the Holy Lands and kept having sex with men. That sounds a bit weird, But they went over there for a couple of hundred years, several generations, and it was a lot more liberal, shall we say, in the Muslim world, where it wasn't necessarily as much of a big deal, i.e. you didn't get murdered for it. And so they just adopted it as a practice because they lived there. So they kind of adopted the local culture, and then they brought it back, and they kept doing it. And then the king at the time of France went, ooh, they've got a lot of money. I need an excuse to take it off them. I'll just say they're all buggerers and philanderers and get them all burnt at the stake. And that's what he did. And he took all of their stuff, and that basically wiped out the Templars. The Hospitallers, or whatever they're called, I really hope I'm getting that right, because if I'm not, I'll feel like a fool. They essentially at some point just went, well, we're supposed to be fighting, heathens, pagans. There are still some pagans in Europe, so we're going to use this as an excuse to take over that land that the pagans own, and use it for our own gain and make money off of that. And then they basically just became, I think, a nation for a while. Or whereas the Order of St. John originally started out as a purely kind of like healing-based thing. So they had knights, but their sole purpose was to get pilgrims to the Holy Land and heal them if they were sick. So any pilgrims that came along and were like ill, they would heal them up. Their knights were there to protect the pilgrims while they were coming over, and that's what they did for the beginning. And they slowly developed more and more into a more warlike order. And basically, there's a lot of history there. They started off in Jerusalem, and it built up and up and up. And they got loads of different hospitals kind of spreading about, and they gained more and more power, more and more influence back in Europe, more money coming over. And at some point, they got an island, Rhodes, I think. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Rhodes in the Mediterranean. And so they were basically based there. And then they started building ships and manning these ships, and became almost like a pirate crusading order. So rather than going in, because by this point the Crusades were basically over, but the Order of St. John wasn't. So they just kept going. They kept raiding all of the Ottoman ships, any ship that was crewed by Muslims essentially, and just kept going, kept doing what they were doing, up until the Ottoman Empire went, no, do you know what, we're a bit fed up with this, we're going to take your island, which they did, which left the Order of St. John homeless. So they went back to Europe, and they went begging around for another place to live. They were like, look, we've been essentially been pirates for a while. We've been keeping the Ottomans at bay. The reason they were allowed to continue for so long is they kept getting funding from Europe, was because they were basically the frontline forces. They were like keeping the Ottoman Empire at bay. Not on their own, obviously, but they were a massive kind of the Ottoman Empire couldn't do a whole lot because the island was there. So any time they went to go past it, there was always the Order of St. John just there, ready to start raiding them and stealing all their stuff. And they were good at what they did. Yeah. There's all sorts of really nice little quotes from various leaders of admirals and pirate kings, all throughout history in the Mediterranean, where they're like, yeah, those Christians are shit, unless it's the Order of St. John, in which case, yeah, no, we're fucked.
Don't fuck with the Order of St.
John. Which isn't to say they didn't lose, but they were always fighting with it's just impossible. Okay, so. Yeah, I know. I'm going all over the place, but essentially...
It's nice watching you guys.
Essentially, they went begging around. We'll go back to that. So they lost their island, and they had to go begging around for a new place to live, and they kept begging, and eventually there was the Spanish king at the time went, look, I tell you what, if you take this place in Africa that is going to doom to fail anyway, but I want someone there to try and hold it for as long as possible, I'll give you Malta. Which is an island that doesn't really have a whole lot on it and isn't really all that useful to me, so I don't really give a fuck either way. And they went yes, because they were a bit desperate before they really thought it through, and then it ended up having to protect this part of Africa. I can't remember where it was. And they did a good job of it, but eventually lost it. But they also got Malta, and they went to Malta, and Malta at that time was essentially just a rock in the middle of nowhere, with not a whole lot on it apart from some indigenous population. There was a town maybe, not a whole lot going. There was a couple of really nice natural bays, which was good if you're going to be the pirate crusaders, but it was nothing like their previous islands. So where they were in Rhodes, it was beautiful. There had already been a castle there was tons of vineyards, the wine, olives. They lived like kings over there. And then they went to Malta, where the primary, source of food was goat. That was about it.
Goat milk.
So they had to import, but they essentially went, look, okay, this is where we're going to build our forts. And so they went, let's start fortifying the island. And so they had to import, and this is how rich they were at that time. They imported all of the stone that they needed to build the forts that they wanted, because I think the native stone, there might have been some native stone that they could use, but I remember they did import an awful lot of shit in order to build up their castles. But essentially, they started building it up, and they started using it as their new base of operation in the Mediterranean to raid. And they raided, they got money, they used the money to build the fort got bigger. At some point, if you go and see Malta today, it's basically just one giant fucking castle. It's amazing. But at that time, they were just building it up when the Ottoman Empire again went, actually, do you know what? We're going to take that one as well, you little bitches.
Fuck these guys.
Yeah. So they sent a huge navy over to Malta to take it off of the Order of St. John again. And there's a whole book written just about that, like several books by several different people, all about this siege. And I could waffle on about it all day, but essentially the reason I was building it up to this point is to show how like zealot-like and dedicated the soldiers of St. John were. There was a point in the siege where they had essentially three castles. One of them had been assaulted first and was due to fall. It should have fallen in the first 5 days, and they were a month and a half into this siege, and it still hadn't gone down. So that was the first thing. But the soldiers in that fort sent a message back to the main fort and went, "Can we come home now? Because it's going to fall, and we don't see why we should all die here." And the commander of the St. John Order sent a message back going, "Okay, don't worry, I've just asked around and got a bunch of... I've asked for volunteers, everyone's volunteered, we're replacing all of you, don't worry about it." And because he did that, the soldiers went, "We're going to lose our honour if we do this. We can't be replaced. Be seen to flee when our brothers were willing to come in and die in our stead." At which point they sent a message back saying, "Don't worry, we're going to hold.
We got this."
Yeah, so they were supposed to fall that night. They had 3 breaches in the walls, and the Ottoman Empire was sending their best forces, and the Janissaries were being sent against them, which that's a whole story in itself. The Janissaries are great. Anyway, they then held it for another 5 days or something ridiculous, and they all died to one man. That one man escaped, which is why we know this story, because he then wrote about it in his memoirs. That's the only reason we knew that happened, because they all fucking died. But they all died purely because they were well, we can't be replaced. No, we have to. Our honour, we will die. And these are 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids, nobles, but they're 19, man.
Can I just add a caveat to this?
Yeah.
Because we were talking about this in the second podcast where we were talking about the Sikhs and Gurkhas, and there's a story within the British Empire regarding the Sikhs, which is basically this story, except I think it was in the Middle East somewhere, and it was 20 Sikh men were holding an outpost. And it was literally dead to the last man, where they were sending signals back, but they were a relay station. And the story, it's a similarly epic story where it's well, they could send relief, or we could just stand here and be awesome and go out gloriously for Queen and Country. And they all stayed and died gloriously for Queen and Country. And they were able to delay the movement of a massive force. Which gave the Empire time to amass a response force, rather than it being a cascade effect of this outpost falls, then this outpost and this outpost. Yeah. Just because these guys decided, no, fuck you, we're dead to the last man, and we're going to take as many of you out as we can.
Yeah. So that's essentially the Order of St. John. Look them up; they're amazing.
I just wanted to kind of do a few corrections.
Oh, what for? What?
For what I was talking about earlier. It's called the First Zionist Congress, and it was in 1897, not 1894, and it was in Basel, Switzerland, not in Vienna. I don't think I kind of reinforced the point here, but there was a British Empire delegate there who basically said that the Empire was behind the Jews of Europe establishing the nation-state of Israel, which I think is potentially why there is this kind of quite often this mix-up between the nation-state of Israel and the Jewish people, Jews as a people, in that the two are for many inextricably linked. So criticism of Israel does translate into anti-Semitism for some people.
Yeah.
But yeah, and there's a rich history. Oh, the other thing I wanted to kind of add, because I didn't quite finish up on it, was that manoeuvre against Egypt with France, UK, and Israel, which was done in secret, was revealed to be a power play and a land grab, because on investigation, the justification given for going to war with Egypt was under a false pretense, similar to like the Iraq war with WMDs. Because the excuse, the rationale given was based on intelligence that they wouldn't have had when they started to do like war prep and manoeuvres for taking Egypt. So, and this is one of the reasons why Egypt has such a poor relationship with Israel, and a lot of Middle Eastern countries surrounding Israel have a really poor relationship with Israel. And the other thing I'd add is when that British Empire delegate in 1897 said to the first Zionist Council that they would be supported, literally the next day in Jerusalem there was a British embassy that was bombed by Palestinians. And so if you want to know where that whole tension between Palestine and Israel comes from, it was from one British delegate saying that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, that's a bomb you just dropped there.
Yeah, like.
I feel kind of bad about what I'm going to bring up next now. 'Cause it's like nothing.
No.
Anywhere is serious.
I just wanted to kind of clarify those things because it's really important that it,
Yeah.
like, it just doesn't sound like me railing against
You just
Israel.
want to truth it, man. You want people to know the truth. Okay, so talking about Parliament
Yes.
and politics and stuff like that, I do have something I'd like to bring up, which is Boris Johnson being sexist.
Oh.
Hey! It's happened quite recently. So he was talking in the Houses of Parliament, and I think he was referring to the Foreign Secretary, or the Shadow one anyway, because it was the Labour one I think he was referring to.
Was it Diane Abbott?
Don't quite remember.
She's education. I can't remember.
Anyway, what he basically did is refer to the lady as by her husband's title. So it went Lady something.
Okay.
I can't remember her surname. And
Miss?
No, rather than calling her by her name, he called her by her husband's name, which was like Lady Baroness of blah Hubbard or something like that, I think. And got called up on it by the Speaker. And he went, "We don't do that anymore because that's sexist, yo." And Boris Johnson was like,
I really hope John Bercow said that. That's really sexist, yo. I put it to my right honourable gentleman. That is rather sexist, yo.
That would be good. It was just a small little point, and it just made me laugh because he was. You could hear him in the background going, "Sorry, I'm just a bimbling idiot. Sorry," when he's not. He's a very cunning, manipulative twat.
Yeah.
He did it on purpose.
Probably.
Fucking
Yes.
Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is the closest thing England has to Donald Trump. Just in case nobody knew.
They do look very similar.
Actors in a similar stupid way as well.
Yeah, I think there is a difference there. Like,
Yeah.
Trump is new money,
Yeah.
whereas I think Boris is old money.
Yeah. Agreed.
And there's a whole raft of things that come with that. So, for example, he was a member of the Bullingdon Club, which it's not
God.
There's an example of it's not just how rich you are; it's also like what your title is. So, like.
Yeah, it's so grim.
Mm.
But yeah, that was it. So, what's on your list, my good man? What else did you want to talk about today?
There is.
Your mama. Oh.
Well, this is a multifaceted subject. We actually might save this for the end because it's quite nerdy shit.
Oh. So we're saving it for the end. Why?
Because like nerds will hang out till the end, and
is that how it works?
Well, I mean,
judging by our statistics, nobody's watching this more than 20 minutes anyway, so nobody's listening to us by this point. So.
It's true. Yeah. So might as well just stop now.
Yeah, 40 minutes of silence. Nobody would ever know.
The question. Well, the subjects were 40k female models.
Oh shit, that is some nerdy shit.
And the other one is sex fluidity in D&D elves.
Oh man, come on, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Fuck it. If people are nerdy, I don't want them listening.
Yeah. So if you're not a nerd,
true.
If you're not a nerd,
not true.
No. If you're not a nerd, you're not welcome.
No. Jesus, that's so not true. Please keep listening.
I'm fucking with you. It's fine.
We're great. Just look up D&D. It's fucking great.
Keep saying it might be true.
Great.
Okay, so
great.
Great. Is it Wizards of the Coast or is that Magic?
That's Magic.
Okay.
I think.
I forget the
whoever it is that does D&D.
Yeah, whoever the company that makes D&D.
It's made trans elves.
Well, they've made sex fluidity elves.
Yeah, true.
Just to be clear, like they're basing it in the lore, and they're kind of just expanding on a piece of lore. There's going to be like a subclass of elves. So
which is gender fluid.
Basically when they wake up, they can change their after a long rest. They can change their gender into whatever they want. They can be male, female, or neither, like androgynous.
That sounds like a cool skill.
Yeah. Now the thing I find kind of interesting about this is there's a couple of look. Let's just be clear about this. There are some dickheads within nerd culture where there's a lot of sexism. There's a lot of
which mostly stems from the fact that they've never actually quite figured out how to talk to girls yet.
Yeah, I don't look like if the only scene you can find that's open to you, if the only scene that's open to you is D&D and role playing games and shit like that, then yeah, I can understand why it attracts some of the less socially able, should we say, which is a polite way of saying they still got a lot of learning and growing up to do.
Yeah.
And yes, it's nasty and horrible, and this is kind of why I kind of liken this sex fluidity thing, because like if you're a trans teenager, for example, and
fantasizing about the idea you can change your gender.
No. If you're finding it awkward to kind of find your scene, not being funny, an awful lot of people, like trans folks, are massive nerds. From what I can tell, like the nerd culture that I'm in, there's a lot of trans people, more so than I meet day to day. That's what I'm trying to say there. So like it's clear it's clear to me that scene is welcoming. To an extent, and if like by modifying the lore slightly so that it's better represented in the lore, that then makes it more inclusive anyway. So I'm cool with it in that respect. And also nerds love having like lore arguments. So if there's a trans kid there who's getting some grief from some dickhead within the community, like riffing on them because they're trans, they can just be like, well, fuck you, elves are gender fluid, so how about you suck my dick and clit? Sorry, that was a poor joke in poor taste, but I thought it was kind of funny. Like, how about you suck?
I thought it was suck my clit and balls.
Yeah, suck my clit and balls, which is a great line. So I think it's great in that respect. So like the more kind of nerds that rail against it, the more I want to see it happen, because the more I just want to see a trans person fucking own them with the law, with the lore of the game. Yeah. Because that to me, I'm like, yeah. They won that argument. Shut the fuck up and grow up.
On the flip side, you've got a whole other plethora of people that are going, why is it just elves? Why not dwarves? Or orcs and humans?
This got me thinking. Okay, because I've realised that there's also a massive transhumanist subtext in D&D. So you've got things like true polymorph, which just allows you to turn into whatever that you are, or whatever you want to be. You've got things like true form, which shamans have, where there's fairies represented.
These
there.
are spells, by the way.
Yeah, spells. But then there's also enchantments that can allow it to be permanent. There's so much stuff within the lore and like within the magical lore and like the crafting lore.
There's illusionist wizards.
That allows you to modify yourself however the fuck you want, and it's not even you have to be magically capable. You just have to find the item, and it allows you to represent yourself that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's like cyberization stuff where you're modifying your own biology to like be better or be more representative of you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So again, it like
be the best you that you can be.
like so gnomes are like massive transhumanists. They're all like artificers and make mechanical wondaments and like replace body parts with mechanical accoutrement. I just think like if any
you're a gnome, aren't you?
no if any space should like have this and cover this kind of subject matter, it's that space. In the same way that like cyberpunk culture explores this issue of like what does being human actually mean, it also does that similarly with like gender. So like Ghost in the Shell has a lot of like subtext when it comes to what is someone's actual gender. Like Major Kusanagi repeatedly is kind of like what were you born as is like a recurring theme. Like what gender were you when you were born, or are you just in a female shell because you want the better agility? Like there's all these weird little references. So because like Bato, who is really heavily cyberized as well, is technically stronger than Kusanagi, but Kusanagi could always kick his ass. And there's this kind of ongoing like little lovers tiff between the two of them, which is that Bato thinks that like it's actually a guy in a male brain in a female body, however you want to kind of like represent it, like whatever language you want to use here. So, like, I just think, again, it's interesting. Like, it's interesting that sci-fi and fantasy has done a better job of representing and discussing these things, like, without overtly actually saying it.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that if you are someone who either creates sci-fi or fantasy media, or someone who indulges in it, you're inherently going to have more of a higher ability to imagine and thereby be able to understand other points of view than the average person can. So,
yeah, I mean, the thing with the the thing with the transhumanism thing, that's not necessarily a trans when it comes to gender identity thing. It's kind of like it's kind of a side effect of that philosophy, which is that if you're free to just modify your body, and it's as easy as, I'll put it like this: if it was
easy as swallowing a pill.
if it was easy for me tomorrow to be female, I'd probably try being female. Now, does that make me trans, or has that now diluted?
Does that make me trans or curious?
Or has that now diluted this concept of gender to the point, because of technology or because of magic, that the idea of gender now becomes absurd?
Yeah.
Because one can choose whatever identity one wants.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, there's
idea.
a difference between
Transmetropolitan, the comic, explores this an awful lot as well, because it basically has DNA splicing in it, where, like, if you haven't read the comics, go and read them, they're amazing. But, like, the general idea is you can basically just take the DNA of anything, can be that for a week. So, if you wanted to be a dolphin, you can be a human dolphin for a week and see what it's like. But there are also people who take that much further and do it permanently. But the weird thing about like Transmetropolitan is essentially that, like, there's this whole subculture of people, because there are aliens in this universe, and the aliens, in order to make money, have sold their DNA to the humans in order for them to use the DNA in this process, so they could become an alien for the weekend or whatever. Yeah. But some people have taken that DNA and changed themselves to become permanently alien. And it explores the whole idea in the comic of who exactly would choose to do that and why. And it's pretty dark, actually, thinking about it. Like, so essentially it's everybody who doesn't really fit in, lots of people with mental health problems, people who don't really feel like they belong, and on top of that, a whole plethora of people who change their DNA to this alien DNA in order to be part of this community and exploit it. And the whole idea is exploring that and, like, what that then creates. So they have their own slums and that sort of thing, where all of these, I guess, trans aliens are. Yeah. And but
trans species.
Yeah.
Trans
but
species. Yeah.
The whole thing while this is happening is because there is trans speciesists and people are, like, trying to deal with that, like, being trans. Like, whatever, doesn't even matter. Doesn't even register as a blip on the map at this point, because people are just like, yeah, all right, fair enough. Whatever.
Yeah. So, like, I think it was kind of the point I was trying to make is, like, I think it's kind of an inevitability that you'd start seeing, like, a better kind of representation as to how, like, language is used. Within, like, role-playing games for specific, there's a lot, like, to be honest, there's an entire fucking podcast that I kind of had about this discussion, but I just found it's kind of interesting.
I have a question for you.
Go on.
So, like, throughout history there have been like movements that have been resisted and then have become recognised. For example, being gay.
Yeah.
Now being trans.
Right.
What do you think is the next one?
There's my joke, somewhat kind of diggy response, which is it's going to be transracial. Well, I identify as black,
right?
Or, like, I identify as Asian or whatever, however you want to classify it. Then it, like, if I'm being really cynical, then it's stuff like I identify as this level of intelligence, or I identify as an A student.
Trans age?
Yeah.
I identify as a 70-year-old man.
Yeah.
Like, I personally feel like, well, hope, actually, because it'd be quite interesting, is if it, because you were talking about people who, last podcast, I think, who change themselves biologically on DNA changes and that sort of thing. I'm hoping it's going to be that. It's people who have biohacked themselves and still want to be recognised. Like, for example, being able to see better in the dark, that sort of thing. Like,
okay, here's the one I think that is potentially going to be the next legit one.
Right.
As in the next legit issue. It's people who have relationships with inanimate objects.
Jesus, really?
Yeah.
All right. I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. How did you know?
What do you mean, how did I know?
Me and my bedpost have been together for a very long time.
Oh, here come the jokes. This is my point.
Yes.
This is my
because if Count Dankula can make a joke... Oh, no, wait, he can't. Sorry, my mistake. I probably shouldn't make these jokes. I'll be offensive. I'll be charged.
Well,
with
remember
hate
the end
speech.
of the first podcast where I said, like, you're always going to come across things that challenge you and make you have to reflect, and you're going to make
Remind you that you're a bigot.
Yeah, you're gonna say the worst thing initially, and then you're going to change.
Do you know what? Actually, I don't necessarily like. What do you mean by inanimate object?
So, I mean, okay, so.
Do you mean robots?
So, okay, so I can imagine a court case happening relatively soon where someone's sex doll, like $6,000 sex doll, gets destroyed or mutilated, or something happens to it. Someone like nicks it off them because they are in a relationship with that, and they're gonna try and apply certain laws that ordinarily wouldn't apply, which go beyond just simple destruction of property or theft of property.
All right.
I can picture that being.
You know,
the
I
next
can
one.
see it.
Yeah.
Fair.
And then when things like AI start becoming a thing, again, like.
Yeah. Oh, I hope that I could definitely see being the next one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to predict it before it happens.
Like relationships with an AI. Like, what's the film called? I can't remember what it's called.
Joaquin Phoenix.
What?
Or do you mean the AI, the film AI?
No, I don't mean the film AI. There was
There's that chatbot that the Joaquin Phoenix is set in the future, and he's having a conversation with what basically is it Echo or Siri thing?
Yeah.
But
I don't remember it being called. What did you say? I'm going to quickly Google it. Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix, the guy who played the Emperor in Gladiator.
Yes. Oh, that's the actor.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, do you remember what the film's called?
No,
though?
I don't.
Okay.
I think it might have been like a woman's name. Like, for those of you that don't know, I haven't actually fully seen the film, but I know enough about it, and I've read enough about the story, and I've seen enough videos that pick it apart, like, philosophically and shit. So, like, I feel I know the film.
Well, I watched it.
It's a film set in the not too distant future where a guy.
Carolyn? Wait.
He subscribes to. I think it's a server. It's like a chatbot server.
Her. It's called Her.
It's called Her. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've watched that film, and sorry for that brief moment of confusion. Yeah, it reminds me an awful lot of that, because essentially he does end up having this whole relationship with his AI. And it's a really touching movie, actually. I really enjoyed it. Like, you should watch it. It's well worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the subplots in Blade Runner 2 as well.
Yeah.
Which was interesting again, because you've got a synthetic who is having a relationship with.
But slightly different in that there was a hologram. So there was something physical there, even though you can touch it. Whereas in Her, it is literally just a voice. Although I think she does also do the thing where she brings a human in.
Yeah, but if the film You've Got Mail has taught us anything, it is possible to be cheating on your partner emotionally with someone else via email.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, true.
Though there aren't any laws against cheating, so.
Yeah, true.
Interesting. I
can't have laws against cheating.
Well, I find this kind of interesting. I mean, like, I say there aren't any laws. Like, I do believe marital infidelity does become a factor when looking at like divorce proceedings and stuff.
Okay, so there are no laws against cheating until you've made a commitment to somebody under the eyes of the law.
But then even then, like, there's no law against you cheating on someone. It's just there are going to be repercussions if the partner finds out and you divorce because of it.
Right. Yeah,
so like, it's not exactly that there's laws against cheating. It's just in certain instances there are consequences where it becomes a factor.
Anyway, so yeah, AIs and falling in love with your sex bot. That's essentially what you think is going to be the next one.
I think that's
all right. Cool.
Or
I
like,
look forward to it.
Or catching, like, the step before that will be things like people who identify as particular species, as other animals, as like wolves and.
Haven't we already had that though? It just kind of got brushed aside as a joke. The whole like furry stuff. Wolf packs in Colorado. And that sort of thing.
I think that's also the case with. Was initially the case with trans people.
True.
And there was that kind of blurring of the line of, trans is just like a part of the gay agenda. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm just thinking back to like the 80s and shit. Not that I was around much for the 80s, but like,
it just always amazes me how hard people fight to make sure other people can't be happy. like.
Okay, this is actually... Sorry, no, go on. Sorry.
No.
No, it's interesting you point this out because this was one of the cathartic moments I had when I found out about the D&D elves thing. I realised that basically you can boil it down to this: there are two types of people in the world, and one type is just kind of accepts the fact that everyone is potentially a little different, and that's fine. There is no kind of right or correct natural state identity thing. There's a lot of wiggle room because we're diverse people, right? There's that group, and then there's the other group that's no, it's boy and girl, man, woman, and it's
Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Well, no. It's interesting that you say that because as soon as you hear that, you immediately think of conservative, what's it called, evangelical Christians, Christian right in America. That's what immediately jumps to mind when you say that, and that's because in those kinds of groups and communities, there is a very strong identity politics going on as to what roles men and women can fulfill. There tends to be a lot of religion involved, and there is also this thing of the correct way of living. There's a lot of morality, a lot of kind of morality questions get brought into it as to what, and this belief in man's natural state, and that it's one man, one woman, you're together forever. You should be fruitful, and anyway, so that's kind of what it boils down to. And I think one group ultimately is going to suffer from a lot of repression. Because ultimately people aren't that, so you get a lot of dysfunction that occurs within those communities, which is why you occasionally hear about those delicious little pieces of pastors who've been caught cruising for men in bathrooms and shit like that.
Cruising
because
for a bruising.
Yeah, which I thought was great. Incidentally, as a side note, I'm not a huge fan of George Michael's music. However, I love that man. I absolutely love it. He's passed away, and I think we have lost. We've massively lost something. I never thought I'd be that guy who fanboyed over a musical artist, but I adore George Michael.
Even though you don't like his music.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of his music, but I own none of his music. Okay,
well, I guess it would be nice to.
Yeah. But his philosophy and his kind of outlook on life and his approach to things, I hugely respect and admire, and just he's precious to me. I don't know how to explain. He just is.
I don't think you're the only one.
Yeah, I mean, there was a fantastic interview that he gave where this was I think it was in the 90s, where he'd been caught again cruising in public bathrooms for sex. For no consequences, no attached sex, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing that some people do, and he, in his case, he was gay, and that's what he was looking to do. Fine. The person he was doing it with was also looking for that, and I personally don't have a problem with it. That's what he wanted to do. No, he's not hurting anyone. Everyone's agreeing to it.
Little bit of bumming never hurt anyone.
Right. I'm not saying I would do it. I'm just saying that's what he was doing. And then the presenter tried to kind of smear it as this particular thing as it's kind of perverted and shit, and it's that clearly is a problem. And he was just no, all I was doing was cruising, which is a pretty common thing in the gay scene. And you want to spin it a certain way, and I'm not going to let you because that's not what this is. But I was just yeah, you fucking own it, man. Yeah, fucking tell him, because the other part of me was just yeah, that interviewer is really uncomfortable right now. I don't want to say he's definitely a homophobe, but there is a part of me that's
I don't want to say he's in the closet, but I'm pretty
sure.
No,
not he's in the closet, but just the idea of a man in a bathroom cruising for another man to have sex with. Oh, it's so disgusting to me.
Oh my god.
Yeah, right. So my point is, I could have this conversation, which is why I'm not sat here ooh, I don't want to talk about it. It's gross, right? But then there are other people who are just I don't want to talk about it. That's gross. Why would you want to do that? That's dirty, right? There's that.
Well, to be fair,
yeah,
if you're doing it in a toilet, it's probably going to be dirty.
I think that's kind of the point, though, isn't it?
What, a little bit of filth?
A bit of filth, yeah.
You see, I prefer my sexual encounters to happen in a clean environment.
Well, yeah, you do.
Yeah, but
that
does not mean I want to stop other people
having
dirty, filthy sex.
This is not me alluding to anything on my part, but I just want to say love is a many splendid, varied thing.
Love in the airplane toilet is a totally valid version of it, and that's all I wanted to say. My mum, as a by the way, wanted to ask. I said we were making this, and my mum was like, "Well, can I listen to it?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I need to just bear in mind, like, I'm going to talk in a different way to how I talk when I'm around you, Mother. So bear that in mind if you ever listen to it. And if you need to turn it off, I understand.
I will understand.
That reminded me of that just there. Although I understand that now it does sound a bit weird that I immediately said, "But my mother," after saying all of that. So, yeah, my bad.
So, Mum, if you're listening.
I'm not doing that.
So, Jake's mum, if you're listening.
Matt, don't do it. Don't renounce your saintly status.
That's true. You're a wonderful woman. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. How about we get this off the subject of mums? Because I just got off of yours!
Oh! No, you didn't.
No, I didn't. Your mother is also a saint.
She is. Anyway, enough about our mums. The 40k models.
Oh, I don't know about this one.
Okay, so there is, for those of you that don't know what 40k is, it's Warhammer 40,000, which is a tabletop...
produced
yeah,
by... Actually, I don't want to publicise them, so produced by a well-renowned model-making company.
I don't know about world renowned. No, yeah, them. So
Those cunts.
they are wanting. There is a discussion in the interwebs regarding the introduction of more female representation within the models that they produce. Just to kind of put
female guardsmen would be amazing,
and I would argue absolutely necessary given the lore of the game. Like you buy models, paint them up, and field armies, and it's set in the future. Go on, Jake.
Okay, in the grim darkness of the far future, people don't discriminate so badly against one sex because they need everyone to die gloriously for the Emperor.
In the eyes of the Imperium, all are equally disposable.
That is much better. That is much better. Thank you, Matt.
So this isn't like more power to
male or female. I don't care as long as it's not heresy.
No, this isn't a question of like girl power and like shit like that. No, in the Imperium's eyes, it's like if they can hold a las cannon, if they can hold a las rifle and shoot, give them a las gun.
If they can't, shoot them now. They're wasting rations.
It's a really brutal world.
It's so
universe, I should say.
Yeah,
Set in the year 40,000.
Set in the year 40,000. Humanity is spread across the galaxy. But essentially got fucked up along the way. Mm-hmm. So they're now in a current state where they've spread across the entire galaxy, but technology is completely backwards. So everything that's created is created in a ritualistic fashion where nobody really understands what they're doing. They just know that if they do it in that certain way, it works, but they don't understand how. Yeah. And they're in this situation where there's essentially the futuristic version of the Inquisition, bureaucracy, and religion. All kind of competing to try and figure out how to dictate where humanity goes, and in the meantime humanity is beset on all sides by various different aliens trying to take back what was theirs or trying to take over. So you get things like entire worlds of billions of people getting bombed by the Inquisition just to get rid of a couple of aliens because the whole world's been tainted and they're like, fuck it, just burn it and try again. And that sort of thing. So it's a really dark, despairing, kind of heavy in despair and just utter hopelessness. And in this world, there appears to be only male guardsmen. Yeah. Which doesn't make sense because you wouldn't get rid of 50% of your potential recruitment base.
There are a few caveats I kind of want to add to this. So there are general armies that are fielded within the Imperium. The Imperium is like the empire of the galaxy. The Imperium represents the human presence within the galaxy and the hierarchy of what controls it. And they amass troops called guardsmen. They've changed the names of all this shit now, and I can't be asked to learn it. But the catch-all term for them are guardsmen.
If you've ever seen Starship Troopers, guardsmen are essentially the troopers.
They straight up are that, just that. Yeah. And if we all remember our aliens, Vasquez.
No, I wouldn't compare them to aliens because until they come up against aliens, they're a badass, cocky elite force that don't take no shit. Which is
a pretty decent representation of what most guardsmen are trained to be until they actually see combat for the first time.
I guess.
Because
I'm not sure.
I'm not right thinking
that.
in the law there's a section that says like a square las bolt to a war boy's head will usually drop him first time. No, it won't. Just really piss him off.
Okay, so I've read like Tennis First and Only, where essentially what it is the people that are recruited and trained and put into the conscription units, which is basically how they cycle through it. They're all kind of like people from various different regiments,
Yes.
kind of brought together and trained. So they all know from the other guardsmen what it's like. So they do try to train them like that, but they know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so they go down and they're just like, what the fuck's going on, man? I don't even know. Oh, game over, man.
Oh,
game
yeah.
over.
I say we just go into orbit and nuke the place.
They see one tyranny, then they're like, nope.
Sorry, just to be clear, there is a huge amount of lore and fluff that has been written out. Books have been written set in this world, like a whole library's worth of books have been written.
Thousands of books.
And there is just so much literature out there about like what life in different sections of the Imperium is like. And literally anything goes. Some like you can have one planet that has a monorail that goes around the entire equator, but they're all using horses and carts. Like you can have like one piece of technology that is super advanced that no one understands how to use, and they all still wear armor and have cavalry. And then there are other worlds where like
armor and cavalry with like plasma lances.
Yeah.
That, you know,
It's a universe where anything goes, which is one of the reasons why I find it really compelling, because like it's a great
anything goes as long as it's dark, depressing, and everybody dies.
Yeah. Yeah. So within that space, it is well known that women are recruited within the guards. There is some wiggle room, so there are certain types of regiments recruited from certain worlds where it's quite likely, given the law, women wouldn't necessarily be used because they would be being used as breeding stock.
Equally, the opposite is true in that there are worlds where it would just be exclusive
just all
women.
Yeah,
because the men are seen as inferior.
Yeah. Or there's a very small population of men who need to stay on world to provide seed. Like seriously, it can be that ridiculous. It's a universe where literally anything goes.
Yeah.
And
I do want to quickly say my piece here though, in that it's all dark and depressing and stuff. However, like as a whole, you only really see the dark and depressing stuff because it's fun, but there is this opportunity for like planets to literally exist in peace for like millennia because they're just left untouched by what is going on around them, and so they then have like guardsman units on these planets that have been at peace for hundreds of years who are now completely shit because they're like, war never touches us, and then they get like a fucking orc invasion or some shit like
one
that.
orc and they all just lose it.
Oh no, mate, not being funny, that is how orcs work. Okay, so essentially, an orc, it's like a big green thing. It is an orc. But when it dies, it releases spores, and those spores develop underground to become more orcs. So unless you burn them with flamethrowers, you've always got orcs.
Yeah.
So like once they're on a planet, very difficult to get rid of them.
It's like the clap.
Wow.
Once you've got it.
It's like the clap, except you can't just take a pill and it goes away.
They're an STD, but for planets.
No, it's like the clap, except in this world, in the dark grim future of the 40k universe, they've lost the cure.
And also, it can kill you violently and easily
via clapping.
And then eventually, if it gets big enough, we'll turn your entire planet into a weapons factory,
and then you become spawn of the Nurgle gods.
Anyway,
we have. Like, some people are listening going, yeah, fuck yeah, 40k. And
preach it, brother, preach it.
Some people are listening and going, what the fuck are they going on about?
So, to bring it home, it is a game that has had not much female representation. And another thing I should add is that there is another type of army within the Imperium, which are Sisters of Battle.
Sisters of Battle!
And I'm just going to say this now.
They are as cool as they sound.
They are as cool as they sound, but they are absolutely not there so that women are represented. I just want to make that absolutely clear. Anyone who's operating under that illusion is an idiot. Is a horny idiot. And yeah,
Nuns in battle armour. Nothing sexier. Big boobs.
Yeah, nuns in really tight corset battle armour, and like. Skin gripping latex and spandex
armor.
Armor. This is armor. Yeah, it's totally armor.
I mean,
in stilettos.
As women's armor goes, it's more believable than a lot of the fantasy shit you see out there.
That's true.
But yeah,
that's true.
You don't see no Sister of Battle dreadnoughts. Let's put it that way.
You do. They're called the flagellant things, and it's got basically a naked woman operating it.
Has it?
Yeah.
Wow.
I forget what
that's come about since last I checked.
They have.
That's pretty great.
They have their big like mech suits, except
yeah,
they're
but
not
where are
inside
the female orcs? That's what I want to know.
well, they're asexual orcs.
I know, that's why I was saying
It's
it.
just like Tyranids. Anyway, so
I mean, like Eldar represent the females as well because they're all female, right?
not all female, but
right? No, they're totally all female.
no,
sorry,
I would argue,
they're all gender fluid.
However, I would argue them. Oh, that's a nice reference. I would argue the model split is closer to 50-50 in Eldar than any other.
And Dark Eldar, to be fair, Dark Eldar Dark Eldar is the only army that has women that can be commanders. Like the commander model
that's
is
a
a woman.
fair point, actually.
Although again, claws, boobs, black latex.
Yeah, and Dark Eldar are not there for
Very
women.
kinky.
Again, Dark Eldar are not
They're
there
for
for
the
women.
kinksters, man.
And that's not me to say that women never play Dark Eldar armies. They do, but they haven't got many options.
I would argue that Dark Eldar is equally as attractive to men and women of a particularly kinky nature in purely aesthetic terms.
No, that's a fair point.
It's all pain and spiky bits.
Yeah, the blurring the line between pleasure and pain.
Well, no,
It's Dark Eldar, isn't it?
they've taken that line, they've ran over it, and then they've rubbed it out, and then they're just doing whatever the fuck they like.
Yeah.
Dark Eldar are the pirates of the universe, and they literally just capture slaves to torture them.
And they are all basically modelled off what's his face from American Psycho. Like they were all just him.
What?
You've seen the film American
Yeah,
Psycho?
yeah, but I wouldn't say they're modelled off of him. They don't look like him.
None of them look like him, but
Yeah.
they all act like him.
Well, the law is like that. However, I think the modelling is
Oh,
closer
yeah,
to
okay,
you know
yeah,
a dominatrix's biggest fantasy kind
No,
of
I understand
style.
that. Anyway,
yeah.
so the company in question
They're vampires.
has put the idea out there that they're going to bring in like female guardsmen models.
Female spasmarines.
Well, yeah, okay, and when this was suggested,
Can I say it?
go on,
Spasmarines.
Space Marines.
Spasmarines.
Okay, again, going to need a bit of context here. Space Marines are essentially the penultimate.
Genetically engineered humans.
Yeah, they are super soldiers. That classic trope. They are that.
7 foot tall.
yeah.
In armour that makes them 10 foot tall.
Yeah,
Big
in armour that
hulk
like
beasts.
triples their strength.
Way more than that.
Like these guys can tear apart tanks with their bare hands, basically.
Not quite.
Not quite, but close
The
enough.
dreadnoughts can.
And they can also be issued with equipment that would allow them to do that with their bare hands.
Yeah.
So
They
like,
can tear a human apart with their bare
Oh
hands.
yeah. Like they can like
They can silverback gorilla it.
yeah, they can go toe to toe with an orc in hand to hand.
Yeah.
Like, and pummel his skull in. Like, sorry, their skull in.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
So like,
So all orcs are Hulk.
yeah,
And all Space Marines are Iron Man in his big suit.
yeah, kind of. Except also they are a Captain America because they've been heavily augmented biologically speaking.
The Captain America in Iron Man's suit.
Yeah, except they also they're now sterile, and you would not recognise them as human.
Wow, humanoid.
They're humanoid, but orcs are humanoid.
They still look like humans. They're
Nah.
just big ones.
Debatable.
Right.
If they're out of their armour, they have those massive. They've got the black carapace, which
What?
is going to make a person look really fucking weird. The
Oh,
black
yeah.
carapace.
I
Yeah.
forgot about that. It's
they're-
not in a lot of
Also,
videos.
I just want to put this out here. I have no issue with female Space Marines, but you're going to have to be quite clear in the law as to what happens because this is literally what's going to happen.
You
Because
would have to have female chapters.
no. Let me just explain. I'll make the case for it. Okay.
Okay.
People seem to think that like Space Marines are like the ultimate badass man. No, they're the ultimate tool against the fight against Xenos, which you've got to. These things are no longer really human. You've indoctrinated them to the point where all they want to do is obey orders.
So now to
They're drones, right?
Now to lure it a bit more
Yeah.
on your ass, a bit more lore on your ass. So the way Space Marines are produced is essentially they will have home planets where they recruit off of, and they recruit the best of the best. So Usain Bolt would have become a Space Marine if he got caught at about 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And what they do is they take you away, they implant you with a load of, essentially a gland,
Yeah.
which
Loads of new organs.
I think the gland creates them, or they implant them.
No,
It's
they
one or the
implant
other. They implant them as well. Okay, they implant a load of new organs in this gland, and this gland changes your DNA, so you become a Space Marine. Literally, just transhumanism.
Yeah.
They literally convert you into something that's no longer you, and the death rate of this is like over 50%. So like it's not like they take the best of the best and then lose most of them in the process.
Yeah, if any
anyway.
of you are familiar with the Spartan program lore for Halo, it's that. like where 50% of the kids who got put through the program died, like violently, from like the medical procedures
like
that were being done.
training.
Yeah, I mean, like, oh, hello. So like there's a bunch. Yeah, so by the end of it, you're not really recognised as human anymore. If you took like an X-ray of this thing, you'd not be like, oh, this is clearly a man. That's not how this thing works.
It has 2 hearts and 3 livers.
Yeah, and an
20
extra
kidneys
and an extra lung.
Why has he got a heart in his foot?
Yeah. They like so if you're gonna I'm gonna put this out there. It's never been explicitly said, but they can go for months on end in their power armor. So I'm just gonna put this out there. They don't have junk anymore. They have cybernetic ports that allow their bladder to urinate straight into the suit that will turn it into drinking water.
Is that lore that you've read?
It's lore that I'm assuming is there.
Alright, okay. Like I do know that they don't have to sleep. Like they can literally switch half of their brain
like
off
dolphins,
at a time, so they can stay awake for weeks on end fighting. Which is quite cool. I genuinely now feel like we've gone way deeper into.
We have, but I still want to say this. We have, but I still want to say this.
Finish your point,
because we've come this far.
All right.
If there are female space marines, here's what's going to probably happen. Their tits are going to get cut off because there's going to be absolutely no use for breasts.
Not even that. Yeah. Like, they genetically modify them into space marines, so it would just be a case of the DNA would change so you wouldn't have them anymore.
Yeah.
So they probably just look the same as other space marines.
Yeah.
Because all you would see is the face.
And like they probably also most likely have what's it called, where you have your hysterectomy. So the uterus, womb, ovaries, all of that out. Because you've got to make room for the organs. And then you're going to have cybernetic ports that connect to the bladder and anus, and so they can go into the power armor. So when we say that there are female space marines, you don't even have to produce new models. You just have to say in the lore, some of these are women. That is literally all that you have to do.
A female guardsman, though, that's legit something that needs to be done, because that would look great.
And what I want for that is really simple. Just give me a couple of conversion kits that allow me to convert some of my models into females.
Just a couple of faces and a couple of chest pieces.
Literally that's all it takes.
So, because you put the models together yourself, so all you need is a couple of chest pieces with boobs on them and a couple of faces that are feminine.
Yeah, and also they're all they're all issued the exact same size flak armor, so it's not even like, if anything, like they're taping them down. Yeah. Like I don't want sexualized guardsmen. I just want something that clearly is
I'm going to have to make
doesn't have a strong
minor.
jaw.
I'm going to have to disagree with you slightly there, in that with the Catachans, I definitely want some women.
Oh,
in,
you want some women?
Tops and
you want some women in tank tops who clearly have boobs. I get what you're saying.
But
I agree.
Fucking an 8-pack as well. Because okay, so like
Vasquez.
Catachan,
you want Vasquez?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you want.
But Catachan. Okay, so Catachan soldiers at the moment are all men, but they all all of the models are like topless or
and they're shredded. They're fucking Rambo.
They are Rambo. So you essentially just want female Rambos.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that.
Oh my god, Death Corps. How would you do that?
You wouldn't,
because Death Corps have like great coats and masks, but I feel like there might be ways of subtly doing it.
Like, I said earlier,
a head one that has the hair coming out the back. Or something
remember
like
I said earlier about the lore, kind of implying as to what was going on.
I know, but the models would look so cool.
No, but listen, the Death Corps are a prime example of this, because where they're recruited from is a planet that is essentially a death world. If you go outside, you die. And there is a question that the administrator has yet to answer. This is going quite deep into the lore, which is how are they able to continue carrying their building their population as quickly and issue as many Death Corps regiments as they're tithing, despite everything that's happened. So I'm going to put this out there. All female stock is used in a breeding program, and there are no.
You're grim.
There are. But so is 40k.
You're grim.
So is 40k though.
Yeah, true.
So
okay. Next topic.
Yeah, next topic.
Way too much about this. Everyone switched off. We're now talking to ourselves.
That's all right. This is why I said we should leave it to the end, and then you were like, "Let's just fucking talk about it."
I made a horrible mistake.
Dickhead.
You love it, you slaying.
I worked out how screwed I'd be if
colour me intrigued.
If the 4-minute warning happened.
Fucking screwed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way I worked this out...
Try being closer to London.
Okay, I don't want to kind of give too much away as to what my location is, but there are 2 very strategic locations, as I see it, as I understand strategic locations to be strategic locations very near to me. One is the port of Dover, and the other is the Channel Tunnel.
You've kind of given away where you are quite nicely.
Not really, but like all you know is I'm in Kent, and we gave that away in the first podcast.
Yeah, but have you seen what 4chan can do?
Yeah. I just want to say this, 4chan. I've got a flag. Come find it.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh.
Come at me, bro.
Oh God. It's just a flag of Pepe's face.
Yeah, that's what it is. Gotta keep them guessing.
Yes, yeah, so they'd nuke near here.
They'd nuke the nuke, and I was working this out based on like what the probable yield from Russia would be, which is most likely to be like 5.2 kilotons, because the ICBMs that they'd have to launch to reach here, the payload that they would be carrying, they'd be carrying multiple.
Jesus.
5.2, which
that's a lot.
Which would be 5,200 tons of TNT. Okay, that's what kiloton is. Yeah. I think. It's related to TNT.
It's a big old boom.
It's a big old bomb. So here's what would happen. Based on my location, again, guys, you can actually use this to potentially triangulate where I am. So there is when the nuke detonates, there's a 5 psi shockwave that will flatten buildings. So if any building, most residential buildings, if they get hit with a 5 psi shockwave,
the immediate kill zone.
That's it wiped out. It's most likely going to structurally fail and collapse. So I kind of flirting with being on the edge of that.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, and on top of that is it's double the diameter of that shockwave, is a radiation zone, is a blast, which if you're outside will mean that your skin will flash burn, and you will have 3rd degree burns on any exposed skin. 3rd degree burns. And the other terrifying thing about that regarding 3rd degree burns is a 3rd degree burn is a burn which happens so quickly and so violently that the nerves in your skin are seared shut and you don't feel pain because of it.
Yeah.
It just horrifically blisters. And then on top of that, it's quite likely that the clothes you're wearing will flash burn.
Yeah.
So on top of that, you're also on fire. So you've got potentially first.
If you're outside.
Yeah, if you're outside. That energy burst isn't particularly long, but so if you're indoors, you can potentially survive that. Is my point.
But you then don't survive what happens afterwards. So.
Well, why not?
Well, if you're in range to get flash burned, then I'm assuming the radiation will probably get you quite quickly.
There's different types of radiations going on here. So what we're talking about here is infrared and like ultraviolet. That's causing that.
So as long as you stay indoors for a period of time, you'll be alright.
That'll potentially do it. Then because it'll most likely be an airburst at the correct height, you're not going to get much fallout. There's a bit of a misnomer regarding what nuclear fallout is.
I did some research into this before, and it's quite interesting because the fallout that you get from a nuclear plant exploding is very, very different to the fallout you get from a nuclear bomb.
Very different.
Because a nuclear bomb uses all of that energy immediately, and there isn't actually a whole lot of energy left to. So you might be okay if you're indoors.
Yeah.
Deep indoors.
It doesn't really have to be that deep. I mean, you've got red brick.
Gonna dig a hole. Gonna beat them at their own game.
Gonna dig a hole and live in it. Russia can't get me here.
So I'm close enough to London that I'm dead.
Possibly. Also, I think there's some strategic locations along
other side of the river.
Yeah. So.
Fuck.
So yeah, probably immediately wiped out if the nukes hit.
Thanks for that, man. Oh no, hopefully I'll be here doing the podcast with you, so that means I have a chance as long as we're indoors. The window's right there, so I'm pretty sure we're fucked.
That's quite a shield.
True. Anyway,
in all honesty, I think if you were in a car, that might offer you enough protection that it wouldn't necessarily horrifically burn you to the point that you die instantly.
Jesus.
You'd be surprised how much that would act as a radiation shield, energy-wise.
I get you. I can't even remember why we started talking about this now.
Was it
just a point? Was it just a point? The whole point on itself? Oh, fair enough.
I started it with I worked out how screwed, and you started giggling. Remember?
Yeah.
So
depends whether or not they hit Calais, though, really, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. And there's some other elements involved into it. There's some other strategic locations, which I would certainly consider. And this goes back to the second podcast which was to do with like why I'm potentially on a watch list.
Oh yeah.
Because I spend a lot of time thinking about these things, just because I'm curious. So, yeah. There's a couple of locations which I don't understand why people haven't, like, people who want to cause, like, a terrorist, who want to do terrorism, I don't understand why they're not doing that.
Probably because somebody has paid a lot of money to figure out that is also something that they would do, and thereby they've put in place measures to prevent that happening.
They have, but the measures that they've put in place are no better than the measures they've put in anywhere else.
Fair enough. Yeah, but they seem to be working. I mean, they catch a lot of them, don't they?
Yeah.
So
it's worth saying this out loud. There is an awful lot of stuff that the media doesn't catch, which are terrorist plots that were foiled.
Fair.
Like,
yeah, a lot of them.
And there are a lot. And I know this because I know people who work within the police force who haven't gone into specifics, just to be clear, but like I've had this story confirmed from multiple people, all of whom I consider relatively reliable when it comes to this subject. Yeah. There is a hell of a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scene that we don't know about, for good reason. Yeah. And it's caught way before it gets to the point an attack can actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do have
those men in blue.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, God bless those men in blue, and also the intelligence agency that is working to protect us. Let's just say that. And this is everything from...
Yeah, we only hear about it when they do fucking wrong shit.
Yeah, this
well, actually, to be fair, sometimes we don't hear about it when they do the wrong
This is
shit
everything
either.
from like politicians, administration staff, Whitehall, civil service stuff, but like border police, border control, all of this stuff serves to kind of as safeguards. And then there's like Ministry of Defence stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'm kind of feeling about ready to wrap up. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I could. Yeah,
I could stop.
Yeah, I could stop. I mean, I've got other stuff, but like I feel the massive chunk of 40k is probably going to kill off a lot of people listening.
Yeah. So, don't know. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. If you are struggling and you feel alone, it's okay. You're not alone. Lots of people are feeling that way. This is a serious final thought. There's no punchline to this.
Yeah, I know.
And I just want to say it's okay to let people know that you're struggling, and it's okay to look for help. And if you're concerned about thoughts that you're having and things that you're thinking about, I'm just going to say this now. Everyone's had that at some point in their life, and it's okay to talk to your doctor about it. There is this big stigma that surrounding mental health issues that I just kind of want to say you don't need to worry about it. If you need help, get help. And, talk to people who you can trust and lean on. And it's okay to talk about these things. And the other thing I want to add to that, if anyone makes you feel bad for talking about those things, you don't need to be friends with them. Serious. Just ditch that. Just get that out there. You don't need that bullshit in your life.
Jesus, I think it's a whole new topic now. But yeah.
I say this because like the last 2 weeks have kind of made me really realise just how many kind of people struggle quietly.
Right.
And feel they can't talk about it. And I just kind of want to say this out loud now.
Talk about it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We may even do a podcast about this at some point.
Go to your doctor if you think that would help.
Yeah.
Go to your best mate if you think that would help as well. Because
not
being funny, it sometimes takes a fair while for your doctor to be able to get you to who you need to talk to, and sometimes having a chat with your best mate will sort it out.
Totally.
But yeah.
Also, talk to that friend who's told you that they've had mental health issues.
Yeah. And if you've got no one in your life who you can talk to, find a charity. Find a hotline. Comment below. We'll point you in the right direction. Find a fucking online fucking chat room. Like there's like sorry, I almost knocked my glass over. There are like not chat rooms, forums. Forums you can go to where you can
there's helplines.
Chat stuff.
Well, there's helplines where you can talk to people. And
some people don't like talking over the phone. That's all.
No, that's fine. But like my point here is, you don't necessarily have to tell them every little thing, but they can point you in a better direction. They can. Yeah. They can give you some guidance on like how to tackle it. And if you're in a job that, the culture within that job isn't particularly forgiving of mental health issues, I get that. But like I said, there are call lines there are phone lines you can call that will give you advice. This leads into my final thought then. If you are in a job where the culture is not very forgiving to mental health, or whatever it is not forgiving to, if there's anything in your job where you're like, I really wish it didn't have to be like this, my advice to you there would be join a union. Whatever union works for your profession, join it.
because like you will get legal representation. They will not be able to fire you if you are mentally ill, because you will have your union rep there and you will have all of their backup, which means they'll be able to go, no, fuck you, Mr. Bossman. You don't get to fire this guy because he's got troubles. He's human. And you accepted that when you hired him, because everybody goes through this sort of shit at some point in their life.
Solid.
Join a fucking union.
Boom.
Just fucking do it. It's the fucking greatest thing you can do. And it costs pennies.
Yeah. Peace out.
Peace out.
And he managed to drop his glass.
And I dropped the glass while trying to peace out. So I
So
guess
he peaced out, but also quite chaotically.
I think
quite unpeacefully.
I think we can call that a premature peace out.
Peace out, guys.